All right, hey y'all, we're going to cover three different parts of solving quadratic equations. The first one is just going to cover, I think, page 1 and 2, and then we'll go to part 2 and then part 3. So this video is just covering part 1. A quadratic equation is in X is an equation that can be written in the standard form. So here's what you need to understand. You need to understand that the number in front of X squared, this is called the coefficient, the number in front of the variable, is A for the X squared. There won't be anything higher than X squared, or there shouldn't be. If there is, that means you're going to have to factor out an X. B is the coefficient or the number in front of X, and this includes the sign. C is the constant. There is no X with it at all, whether it being X squared or X. So you need to understand in all cases, when you're dealing with a quadratic, that means your highest exponent is a 2 or your degree is 2. The A is the number in front of the X squared, B is the number in front of the X, and C is the number without an X. Now you have to also understand that A cannot be 0 because then you wouldn't have a quadratic because you wouldn't have X squared. So the other thing to understand is there are two answers that are derived from this format. So two answers are derived from a quadratic. All right. A, B, and C are what you're going to use to get there. The zero product factor principle, is if A times B is 0, well, then one of those has to be 0 because anything times 0 is 0. So either A has to be 0 or B has to be 0. That's all that means. So let's say we have X times Y is equal to 0. And if I say that X is equal to 7, then you know that Y must be 0 because 7 times 0 would have to give us the 0. If instead we say that X times Y, Y is 0, and I say that if X is 0, well, Y can be anything in the world. It doesn't matter because 0 times that number is still 0, including 0 times 0. All right. Steps to solving quadratic equations by factoring. Now, we've already done the factoring piece. To solve, however, is something we haven't done. We've only simplified and we've found the factors of them. We've not solved anything. To solve, there must be an equal sign. There must be an equal sign. And to solve, you always want to have it equal to 0. So you're going to write the equation in standard form, if necessary. That means you're going to get everything to one side of the equal sign and the other side will be 0. Here's the gig though. You want your X square, the number in front of the X square, you want it to be positive. So whichever side of the equal sign you have to take it to make sure that X squared, that number in front of X squared, that coefficient is positive. Muy importante. You don't want to deal with a negative A. All right. Once you get it in that format, then you're going to factor it, which was what we've already done. You did that in the previous unit. So we're going to factor. And this is X and X. Factors of 6 that sum or add up to 5 is what we're looking for. This is your refresher. So for 6, the factors of 6 are 6 and 1. That does not add up to 5. 6 plus 1 is not 5. And 6 is 3 times 2. Well, 3 plus 2 is 5. So 3 and 2 are our numbers. And everything is positive, so everything's positive inside your factors. Now, here's the solving piece. We're going to use the zero product principle. You don't know that we're necessarily doing that, but that's what we're doing. We're going to set each one of the factors equal to 0. And we're going to solve for X for both of those. So 3 is added to X. So we're going to subtract it from both sides. X equals -3. 2 is added to X. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides of the equal sign. And X is equal to -2. What does this mean? What does it mean that those are the solutions? Now, you don't have to do this every time, but you do need to understand what this means. All right. What this means is that for this equation here, if you plug in -3 for x, then your answer, when you simplify the left side, will be 0. You can do the same thing with -2. Plug in -2 everywhere there's an x, and when you simplify the left side, you should get 0. Let's check that, just so you can understand what this means. So -3 squared plus 5 times -3 plus 6 should equal 0. -2 squared plus 5 times -2 plus 6 should equal 0 as well. 9, 5 times -3 is -15 plus 6 is equal to 0. 9 minus 15 is -6 plus 6, and that is 0. -2 squared is 4. 5 times -2 is -10 plus 6 equal to 0. 4 minus 10 is -6 plus 6 is 0. So yes, those worked perfectly. That is just because I want you to understand what the two solutions mean. You don't have to do this every time. All right. And that's the steps. Write each equation in standard form. Make sure it's from the highest exponent down to the constant. Everything on one side of the equal sign where the number in front of x squared is positive, and then set it all equal to 0. Factor it. Once you get it factored, set each of those factors equal to 0. Solve each of those factors for the variable, and then you can check the solution if you want to. Most don't. The next one here, do not just start dividing both sides by x. You're not going to like what the answer is because it will be wrong. You need to get all the terms on one side of the equal sign, and the other side needs to be 0. So because this is a positive 8x and we already have a positive x squared, I want to bring this 8x over here. So I have to subtract 8x from both sides. Now, you can't subtract 8x from x squared. They are not like terms. So we're going to write it like this. Now we're going to factor out what they have in common. Between this term and this term, they both have an x in common. When I factor x from x squared, I'm left with an x. When I factor x from -8x, I'm left with -8, and set that equal to 0. Now, the next step is to set each one of these terms equal to 0. Now, this is already an answer. I can put a box around it. It's already x is equal to a constant. Perfect. The next one, I need to solve for x on one side by its little lonesome. So I have to add 8 to both sides because 8 is subtracted from x. So x is equal to 8, and there is my second answer. All right. X squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. They are already set up in the format that I want them to be in. So now I'm going to factor them. The factors of 9 that add up to 6. Well, 9 is 9 times 1 and 3 times 3. And this is the one that adds up to 6. Okay, it's a perfect square. All right, binomial squared. Now I could set each of these equal to 0. That's basically what we're doing. I don't need to because they're exactly the same. So I'm just going to do this, solving for x, subtracting 3 from both sides, and x is equal to -3. Now, if you are going into problem solving statistics, you're done. If, however, you're going into college algebra 1590, you need to understand, put this in your notes, only those moving on to 1590, that because there's two of them, this is a double solution, and you're going to need that to know that when you get to the next class. This one's already set up exactly as we want it, so let's just go ahead and factor it. It looks like it's the 9 is a perfect square, x squared is a perfect square, and 100 is a perfect square. So this is a difference of two squares. Difference means subtraction. So I can just break this down into the exact same thing, 3x, 3x, 10, and 10. but I need to have a negative and a positive. Now that's done. That is factored. Now I need to solve by setting each of these binomials equal to 0. Ten is subtracted from the 3x, so I need to add 10 to both sides of the equal sign. 3x is equal to 10, and then 3 is multiplied to x, so divide both sides by 3. X is equal to 10/3. There's one of my answers. I have to have 2 because the degree is 2. So this 10 is added to 3x. I need to subtract 10 from both sides. 3 is multiplied to x, so you have to divide both sides by 3. And x is equal to negative 10/3. Okay, this next one, y'all, I see this next mistake a lot. Please be careful and don't ever do this. It is so wrong. People are like, oh my God, it's already factored. It's already factored and set equal to -5. That's fantastic. I can just take x equal to -5 and 3x plus 8 equal to -5. Please don't do that. That is so wrong. Do not do that. It has to be a 0 over here, not another constant, no other integers. Okay. So we're going to distribute x to 3x plus 8. So that's x times 3x is 3x squared. X times 8 is positive 8x is equal to -5. Now, I need a set equal to 0. You've got to use that 0 property. Let's move that -5 to the other side. It's negative over here, so we need to add 5 to both sides. So 3x squared plus 8x plus 5 is equal to 0. Now we need to factor it. 3x and x. All right. There's a couple different ways we can do this. We can do trial and error. And I would try a 5, a 1, a 1, and a 5. So 5x plus 3x, and that gives me 8x. So that works. All right. So it's 3x plus 5 and x plus 1. For the next one, I'll do it the other way so you can see both. So now we have to take each of these binomials and set them equal to 0. This is the solving. And solving for x. 5 is added to the 3x, so we need to subtract 5 from both sides of the equal sign. We get 3x is equal to -5. 3 is multiplied to x, so we're going to divide both sides by 3. X is -5/3. We have to have 2 answers, so we're going to subtract 1 from both sides because it is added. We get x is -1. As you're going through this, write down questions that you have so that we can have a touch base before you either do your homework or just to make sure you're understanding everything before you're left on your own. All right, the next one, the first thing we need you to do is get everything on the same side. We're using w squared instead of x squared. If that bothers you, change it. Make it an x squared. I don't care. Now, in mom, when you go to put your answer, make sure that you're using the variable that's required because she might just say, All right, let's move everything over to what the w square is because it is positive. So I'm going to subtract 80w and add 60 to both sides. And set that equal to 0. All right, first thing I do is I look to see if these numbers have anything in common. They do. They're all divisible by 5 at least. So I'm going to factor out a 5. And the 5 from 25 is 5, w squared. 5 into 80 is it 60? Where's my calculator? Let's do this. There's 1, 16. And then plus 5 into 60 is 12. I should have known that. All right, keep your 5. We're going to, or what we could do if we want to get rid of that 5, you can't do it if there's a W or an X outside of here. You can only do this to get rid of numbers only that are outside of the equals, outside of the parentheses. You can go ahead and divide both sides by 5. I'll do it in this next step. All right, now remember, I'm going to do this differently. Hold on. I want to find out what I'm going to go ahead and factor this into. So in order to find out what my parentheses are going to have, I need to take 5 times 12, and that's 60. And I need to find out what the factors of 60 are that add up to 16. So the factors of 60 are 6 and 10, and 3 and 20, and 2 and 30, and what is 2, 3, 4, nope, 5. Well, 5 and 12, that doesn't give me 16. 6, and I'm gonna that. Okay, I guess that's it. All right, do any of these give me a negative 16? Well, if they're both negative, it's going to give me the negative. So here it is right here, 6 and 10. If they're both negative, negative 6 plus negative 10 is going to give me a negative 16, and that's what I want. So how do I want to write this? I want to write it as, keep messing this up, sorry, y'all. Let's go with 5w squared minus 10w minus 6w plus 12 equals 0. Okay. That's how I'm using the negative 6, the negative 10 and the negative 6, because these two together give you negative 16. Now we can look at just these first two. We can divide both by 5, too, to get rid of that. That's gone. Look at these first two. What do they have in common? We've got 5w in common. And when you factor 5w out, you're left with w minus 2. For the next one, we want w minus 2 as our other binomial. So I need to factor out a negative 6 in order to make that happen. Now, I'm going to factor from this one and this one. They both have w minus 2 in common. When I factor w minus 2 from this term, I'm left with 5w. When I factor w minus 2 from this term, I'm left with negative 6. Now I can set each of those binomials equal to 0. We've already done that other stuff before. You did that in the previous lectures, and you should be tested on it right about now. But from here on, this is the new step, because we've always gone just to right here, and boom, you're done. You factored them. Now we're solving for w. So you're going to take the w minus 2. I'm going to come up here and do this. Set it equal to 0, and the 5w minus 6, and set that equal to 0 and solve. Add 2 to both sides. W is equal to 2. 6 needs to go first. And then divide both sides by 5. So W is also equal to 6/5. You should always have 2 answers unless it's the exact same answer because of a double solution. I think that's it for the first video. I'll see you in the next one.